one of the things that I want to try to plant in your minds for this week is that our research design is the framework. It's the blueprint. It's the broad structure for how we establish our modes of data collection, and it's our explanation for why we collect our data the ways that we do. It's this broader sort of plan for data collection. And our plan is ultimately influenced by our desire to understand the magnitude and the existence, I should probably put those the other way, the existence and the magnitude of a cause-effect relationship. So we want to know the existence. Is the cause-effect relationship there? And if it is, how strong is it? And a quick note on kind of terminology. The cause-effect relationship is addressed in our studies in respect to an intervention and an outcome. The intervention is the actual activity that a program or an organization performs. So we can try to understand the extent that that program or activity affects some change in the wider environment. If you think of an example of a nonprofit that's providing services to a homeless population in El Paso, the intervention would be the types of services that they provide to this homeless population. Perhaps it's temporary housing, perhaps it's some kind of job training or workforce development programs, perhaps it is a program that provides them with their own homes, like apartments, so that they can get a little more stability in their lives to transition into other areas of employment and self-sufficiency. So all of those services and activities are part of what we could term an intervention, an activity provided by an organization. And our outcome would be the actual change in the lives of the people who have been a part of this program, the recipients in the homeless community. So when we study these things in the field, we study them as a quasi-experimental research design. And we call it a quasi-experimental research design because it's not a scientific research design that's performed in a lab. The main characteristics that I would emphasize between quasi-experimental research and just plain scientific experimental research is that, number one, in scientific research in a lab, more often they randomly assign treatment and control groups, and they assign their variables or subjects to those different groups. There's a lot of material on random assignment in the readings for this week. Number two, though, is that in a lab or experimental setting, generally the researchers control influences from the external environment. If you're testing molecules, like a vaccine and a virus in a petri dish in the lab, you're controlling the external environment in terms of what can influence the ways that those properties and those elements work with each other. When you're studying people in organizations, especially over time, if you're studying student learning in a school, if you're studying a job training program in an organization, if you're studying homeless services in a city, there are outside influences you can't control that are going to influence how well people in the homeless community are transitioning into more self-sufficient lives. Outside factors that are influencing how well students learn in school. Outside factors that are influencing job performance and job satisfaction in the workplace outside of the training program or other management interventions that you are performing. It's a second major important dimension of quasi-experimental research. The third is the consistency of the ways that the people we study behave. In core physical scientific research, research is performed on subjects that are properties or molecules or vaccines and viruses, physical elements that generally perform consistently across trials. So if I'm testing the vaccine against my virus in January in the lab, I can do the same test again in July or a year later, and generally those properties are going to treat each other the same way. Well, in social science research, what we perform in program evaluation, we don't study physical molecules and properties, we study people. And people behave differently at different times and in different conditions. So we need to account for the ways that people perform inconsistently in determining the strength of cause and effect relationships in the areas that we study. So the broader challenge of quasi-experimental research is ruling out rival explanations. If we make a claim that a causal relationship exists and that it's strong, well, we need to be able to show how our finding is not due to other factors within the context that we're studying, and that it's not due to something that's unique about the people that we're studying. And one of the ways that we can help to rule out a lot of these rival explanations is in the ways that we select our data collection techniques, and in the ways that we sequence our data collection techniques, and in the ways that we decide who to target our data collection techniques to. Again, the three main questions of research design: which data collection techniques to use, when to use them, who to apply them to. And the readings do a good job of showing how multiple modes of data collection can increase confidence in findings, either before an intervention or after an intervention, or that the ways that the actual measures of the pre-test or post-test can be modified in different conditions to improve our understanding of an intervention's effect on our outcome. And it also does a good job of explaining the strength of considering control groups and treatment groups in our research. So a control group, again, is a group of people who we study who don't get the intervention, who don't get the support, who don't get the program activity that another group gets. So if we study both groups over time, we can see if the group that we're helping is really changing at a faster rate than the group that we're not helping. That helps us to rule out some of these other environmental influences, these other contextual factors that could be influencing whether or not a person changes over time. The other thing that I would want to emphasize for this week is that we need to understand the different models and techniques of research design, most clearly articulated by Shadish, Cook, and Campbell, because any program evaluation faces constraints. Constraints in money. How much money do we have to spend on collecting data and analyzing it? How many people can we hire to be involved? Two, what kind of constraints are there in terms of staff and participant contribution? People in organizations are busy. If we try to get them to fill out a dozen surveys, they're not going to have time to do it. That could have an adverse effect on other parts of work productivity, so we have to sort of limit how much data we try to collect. Time, how much time do we have to conduct the study? There are all these resource-oriented and related constraints as to what kind of study we can do. So the key really is being able to understand the different designs that are presented, to choose a design that best meets the budget, the timeline, and the condition of the respondents that you want to study. And I'll talk about that some more in our PowerPoint. Thank you.